Kathleen Birrane, Maryland Insurance Commissioner, and the NAIC H Committee Chair, is going to moderate this last panel of the day. Her panelists are going to include Petra Hielkema, who is the chair of the European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority, affectionately referred to as IOPA. Padma Elmgaard, Chief Technology Officer of Global Atlantic Financial Group. And Dr. Frank Kwan, an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to, I know, what's going to be a very robust discussion on the use of AI and sophisticated technology in the insurance sector, with a focus, I think, today on streamlining operations, optimizing efficiency, and the right regulatory approach. And Andy Mays, you were not kidding when you talked about these lights, because they are very intense. So thank you again to our panelists. I will just mention that their very impressive CVs are available online at the forum website. And I would remind everyone to join the conversation by going to Slido and asking your questions. So just to kind of kick us off, technology continues to invigorate and transform the insurance sector. It drives innovation in product development, design, pricing, and distribution. Sophisticated AI-driven data analysis and predictive modeling enables the industry to target and fill protection gaps. It's a way that we mind that gap. It helps us break down barriers to equitable access to coverage, to respond more nimbly and accurately to shifting risk environments. Generative AI, including large language models, is really transforming how we accumulate, how we assimilate, and how we communicate back out information. It has tremendous potential to impact every phase of the insuring relationship. So what does that mean for us in terms of insurance regulation? You know, technology is a how. It's how licensees do things and make decisions that themselves typically maybe already subject to regulatory standards and oversight. But this particular methodology, the use of AI and other complex computational methods, can present unique risks and challenges, both internally in your development and deployment, and externally as regulators think about the right balance between things. So one of the things our panelists today are going to do is they're going to help us address that development, that deployment, and that balance in sort of the regulatory oversight. So I'm going to start with a question about transparency, because people are still scared sometimes of these sophisticated technologies, right? And I think part of the reason that people are still afraid of, they don't understand it. They don't understand it generally. They don't understand it, how it's applied to them. They don't even necessarily know when it's being used or how it's being used. So let's start with the discussion about how important is transparency and measurement, and what is the right level. So Petra, let me start with you to get your thoughts about that, and then we'll just go right down the line.
Thanks, Kathleen, and great to be here, even though with the lights I can't see you anymore. But it was a pleasure to see so many familiar faces. I've been listening, and I haven't finished the series yet, to a podcast, The Black Box from The Guardian, and it's a really interesting podcast because it's about AI, how it developed, what it means, but it goes precisely also on that, the part that we don't understand, or the part where the AI itself learns itself and then starts doing things itself. And what if an insurer uses that? You see the mix of the potential and the efficiency, but also maybe new ideas that we didn't think of that are helpful, but also the risks and how do you deal with that? So I think first of all, and in the EU, by law, you need to say, hi, you're talking to a chatbot or you're talking to an AI. So being transparent on an AI involved is helpful. And at the same time, I think we need to develop then further, also as a supervisory community, on how to work with that. So when it comes to a black box and being able to explain what happened before the decision, always has been a requirement. So if you're really technological neutral, and that is what we say we do, what you say to to the industry you supervise is, I don't care if you use a pen and paper or an Excel spreadsheet or a complicated model or an AI, I want you to be able to do that. And as long as we have models where you really can't do that, you need to think if you really want to use it. Now, if you then take it one step further, there's sometimes models that you can use where explainability might be less relevant. And that could be in the back office where you just want to reach efficiency that has no implications for decisions related to consumers. That is one, maybe. Could also be that you lose less structured data, film, videos, pictures that you get, that you need to analyze. Here, of course, it's less clear how good you can explain what the AI did. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but I think it starts with the recognition that you need to do a lot more here to ensure that through governance and through other measures, including human in the loop, you come to that explainability that is needed. And finally, I mean, there's many things we need to consider, but finally, to mention here is that when you use these toolings that you get from providers, I think already when you start into the dialogue of starting to use that piece of software, you want to also understand how did they get that, what information can they get to you. Maybe they can even be compliant by design in order to make sure that when, as an insurer, you need to start explaining, you are actually enabled also by the software provider. So to cut it short, there are black boxes that you may not want to use. There might those that seem to be black boxes, but then think about how you want to use it and what you need to do to make sure that you still can use it to, in the end, deliver on the explainability and transparency that you need to.
Pat?
Yeah, so thank you for having me, and it's great to be here. I also can't see anyone. So I agree, I think, with what Petra's just said, right? Like, so to utilize sort of AI, so AI span across a sort of a pretty large swath of tooling, right? Like, and it has been around for a long, long time. With the advancement of generative AI, so it became a bit more at the forefront of the sort of the general public, so to speak, right? So I think in order to sort of gain that transparency, and Kathleen, to your point, to demystify what is artificial intelligence, it helps for people who are using artificial intelligence to understand explainability, right? So understand sort of the process that the artificial intelligence systems, because there could be more than one model that's involved in the systems, how does it make decision? What are the processes it's taking to make those decisions? Understand the models that's being used, right? Are they deterministic? Are they probabilistic, right? Understand sort of the data that was used to train the model, understand the input and then the output of the model, like we call that sort of the data provenance surrounding it, right? And then lastly, I think, understanding the security and the protection when the AI systems were implemented, right? So what are some of the technical controls that exist in place to prevent sort of misuse? What are some of the do's and don'ts for users, right? To get the most out of the AI system, but also to be able to sort of understand what you need to ask, what you need to feed it to get the desired output. And lastly, understand the limitations of the AI systems. And I completely agree with the human in the loop thing, right? Like, so AI toolings and systems are precisely that. They're tools, right? And I think the users to demystify and to understand it more, it's very helpful to be part and parcel of sort of training that ecosystem for that use, so people are more comfortable to utilize the output of the AI. But ultimately, I think the humans make the final decision at the back of the output of the AI.
Right.
Hi everyone. I'm training the actuaries, and I also work as a data scientist when I in the industry for 1 year, but short, but it's impactful enough. And The reason I came to this panel is I want to hear about regulatory side of the thoughts, and hopefully I can learn from it and gain some research experience or some thoughts. And when I received these questions, and I was thinking, as an academic, you should find a reference and try to look at it. Is there any similar like industry like deal with this AI? So one thing I was thinking is the airline. It's not because of airline is also start with the AI. It's because also related to the like AI. Because if you think about the ticketing system, and the price of the ticket is very sophisticated, and its pricing is very discriminatory. And this is the first generation of the data science model. Maybe most of the people didn't realize that. And second, and if you're coming from the overseas and you're taking the international flight, and 80% of the flight is operated by the machine. It is AI. And right now, Elon Musk started to talk about autonomous like a taxi driver, and then shall we be able to find some like clues here? So when it comes to the transparency, I want to ask 3 questions. First, what degree of the transparency? And when I stepping into the airplane, and should I really transparently know that what mood of this pilot has? Does this person had a big argument with partners, or like before stepping into the like a plane? Should I be cautious about it? And second, is transparency really able to achieve? From academic perspective, I'm very not convinced by the current technology. And think about data transparency is not there, and the model complexity is horrible. And the third, data scientists, machine learning engineering actuaries spend months to calibrate one model. And even with the really nitty-gritty technical detail of the document about the model, it's really hard to understand what's really going on. And on the other side, airline, when the bad thing happened, we do have a black box injected into the plane, right? And that they already steal the black box word before, right? And the third one, so if the full transparency is not there in near term, then what should we do? And I talk to my students, you should still be very innovative, and even under the very regulated industry. And always I'm joking that the failure of the innovation will not be like life-threatening, like pilot crashing the flights, right? And so I recently also read that the EU started coming out with a certain regulation based on the severity of the AI model can impact on the human life.
Well, I think what you're doing is you're giving us that continuum, right, of who needs to know what when. So when we talk about explainability, we talk about transparency, to whom, in what circumstance, right? So for example, Padma, you're talking about, as were you, Petra, a circumstance where you really want what is the level of explainability that you need to be able to provide to the regulator, right, in various circumstances. And that's probably different than the transparency that may need to be available to a consumer, because I am now really afraid to sit in an airplane. Right? But it's that sort of circumstance, right? So I don't really necessarily need to know as a consumer how that model actually works and how data was trained, but it's kind of nice to know that you were actually using a drone, that you put through a score, and that made certain decisions that caused me to not be able to get the insurance that I thought that I needed, right? Because maybe that skylight is actually just a shadow because something read it wrong and the score is wrong. So that balancing act. But the consumer desire, that trustworthiness, it sort of goes in both directions, because, Padma, I want you to talk, if you would, a little bit about the consumer demand, right? So what is it that is driving the progress? So you're seeing innovation in the use of technologies and AI in insurance, particularly product development. What are the drivers there, and how significant is consumer expectation and demand in that?
Yeah, so I think consumer expectation is significant in the area, right? So, I mean, it's no surprise that I work mainly in life and retirement insurance. If anyone's ever tried to, I'm sure there are many, many people here in life and retirement as well, to get access to these products, to even apply or buy or purchase any one of these products, it's painful, right? It's not everything is digital. Access to information is not democratized, right? And if you look at it, that may be okay for people who are not quite well versed in technology, right? But demographics changing, right? Like, so the changing demographic will require sort of a more seamless way to have access to these products. And we also want to democratize some of these products. They shouldn't just be made available to a very small subset of consumers who have the wherewithal to have access to, you know, a number of financial advisors. But to democratize these type of products across the board to consumers, people would want to be able to compare and contrast all of these products, right? So now, how do you do that? So you could do that sort of utilizing technology like AI, right? Like, so, you know, everyone I'm sure has an Amazon account. If you're buying something on Amazon, it actually provides you a compare and contrast in terms of the product that you're buying. You can't really do that with insurance product very well today, right? So I believe there's a lot of progress that need to be made in this area, and consumer demand is definitely driving that, right? Filling in application, you want to have it assisted, right? It will be a lot simpler for you to be able to do that. You want it to be able to, if you buy health insurance, you know, most people have wearable devices. They want to be able to sort of upload the information, and you could really see how you're being charged for the premium versus what you're getting from it, right? And I think, you know, it's pretty difficult to do that with sort of, you know, just coding every single logic, right? You know, artificial intelligence, you know, deep learning, unsupervised learning, given the right sort of data set to some of these AI systems, I think it's capable to democratize access to products and make it easier for consumers to have access to these products in a more seamless manner. And, you know, safety and risk is obviously paramount in that, right? And, you know, consumers will need to have some understanding of what the AI model is doing to sort of generate the output that they require, right? They don't need to have the deep level transparency into what every single algorithm within a deep neural network is doing, but understanding the process of what it takes to get there is something that I think consumers would want to know.
So you've talked a little bit about some examples of where AI has a place and where consumers expect to see AI and see the insuring experience be easier because of AI and what we're used to in other environments now. So building on that, where you see the most promising use of AI, but also what are the impediments to that? What do you see as the barriers? And I'm going to ask you to start us and then ask Frank to address that as well. Use cases and impediments.
Yeah, so I think, you know, not all use cases are created the same way, right? Like, so AI by default requires a large amount of data, right? For training, for tuning, for it to then start to sort of learn and come up with something that's really useful, right? Like, so, you know, getting to, even if you were to find a sort of good use case, let's say, and then you have copious amount of data to train, getting from that sort of proof of concept to full adoption in production, speaking from a carrier perspective, is a challenge, right? Because the way I view AI, it's a three-prongs play, right? So you've got your infrastructure is key, data is key, but upskilling of resources and people who work in insurance firms to be able to truly utilize that technology to sort of benefit consumers, right? So I think that last bit, I don't believe we're there yet from an insurance industry, right? This industry is also not very fast-moving in a lot of ways when it comes to sort of changes, right? And I think those three things are required and will be impediment if not tackled the right way.
Yeah, I maybe follow up with some complaint with my students, and they freshly graduated, and with the full skill, full stack of the technology, try to change the world, and when they are stepping into the insurance world, they start to, oh, what's really going on? So we have a legacy system that not prepared for the AI, right? And the garbage in, garbage out, it's 1960 sentence, right? And it's still happening right now. And also, we start to see the brightest mind of the students are going to the IT industry because they have higher packages, and actuaries start to not taking exams because they want to go to the data science field. So losing the talent is also, and we also some complaint I also heard is when it comes to the ROI, a return of the invest, and the data science project is do take some time to be mature and materialized, and but in a real business world, it's take maybe some people are not enough patience about it. So that's why some projects are failing right now.
So I think it's interesting, right? Because you all are very polite, because normally when I hear AI, insurance, barrier, impediment, the next word I hear is regulators and supervisors.
Not
right?
yet.
So exactly. So it is a hard balance between, assuring that there is a robust, innovative environment and incentives for carriers to use technologies in ways that benefit the ecosystem, benefit consumers, and yet at the same time, recognizing the potential for consumer harm and being able to address that as a responsible regulator with responsible regulation. So as a responsible regulator, Petra, that I know you are, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the EU AI Act, right? So we know that there are areas and certain types of what have been deemed to be high-risk insurance applications within the EU Act structure. It sort of starts with a fundamental rights impact assessment prior to the deployment of AI. So that is the term that the Act uses, a fundamental rights impact assessment. And I'm interested in two things. I'm interested in your understanding of what does that mean, how carriers begin to operationalize that. I know they've got a pathway. I know there are guidelines that are going to have to be created. And then we'll talk a little bit about what the impact might be on innovation from standards like that.
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. And yes, indeed, there's an AI Act in very final phases in the EU, and also at IOPA we will be drafting some underlying regulation there. What does it mean? And I think there's two things important to understand about this act. First of all, it's a cross-sectoral act. It's a horizontal act. So it's an act that will apply to any form of AI used in any sector. And that means it wasn't drafted with in mind the fact that, for example, insurers already have a lot of regulation already going on. So that is the first. The second is that indeed the starting point is fundamental rights. And I think what's very important here to understand is that the AI Act does not introduce the concept of fundamental rights. There's a UN Charter and there's a lot of other documents that actually focus on human dignity and fair treatment of human beings and non-discrimination. So that is not new, but what is new is that it says you need to actually check whether or not you have that in balance when you start using this tool. Does that make sense? To me, it does. I try to attend, and we were talking about this over lunch, I try to attend conferences with insurance innovators, and what strikes me is that when you go to the booth, and I can highly recommend that, of all the exhibitors, you talk to fintechs that come up with new tooling, they're often developed by either software developers or by data analysts. And what strikes me is that when you start to ask about these questions of fairness, etc., data analysts will get to biases and how to focus for biases, deal with biases. Software developers more or less don't. And this always makes me feel that it's good that we have a role here as supervisors, because we need to make sure that they have that in focus. And that is, I think, what the AI Act does, because Solvency II, and I'll get to that why that is relevant, is still a bit of a niche. That's for those who are in insurance. But AI and AI development is so much broader, and those who do that but don't do necessarily consciously insurance, they now, through the AI Act, are pinpointed to thinking about this. Mm-hmm. Now, when the AI Act was originally negotiated in Brussels, I sent a letter to the Commission and the Parliament and the Council saying for solvency, for insurers, this is not per se necessary because we have Solvency II, and what you are proposing, I can do under Solvency II. And that was, I think, a good thing to do, because at that point, anything from the chatbot that talks to a consumer initially to indeed acceptance of clients for health insurance, everything was identified as a high risk. Anything an insurer did, that has now been reduced to life and health. But life and health is still identified as a high risk. What does that mean? There is some forbidden use of AI in the AI Act. That's a category you just can't do that. And then there is a risk of chatbots, etc., where you need to say it's an AI, but that's like a low risk category where you need to inform, but you can use it. And then there is a category of high risk where some rules come in that were not there before for those who were not insurers but using AI, where you actually need to consider fairness, data quality, etc. And this is the area where health and life is still in. Now, why is that in? That is because even if you really like to be served digital, and even if that is a very, very seamless customer experience and you get a good price, but what if you don't get a good price? What if you get an automatic mail that says, sorry, we can't insure you? And what if you feel that that is unfair? And to whom do you talk? And then if you talk to someone and not a computer, what if they say, but that was what the computer told us? This is where the concerns are of politicians and others who make these laws. And this is what, and I think it's a fair concern. Now, if I list the AI Act in all the articles and I hold them which are relevant for insurance, I can identify in Solvency II the article where we already had that. But nevertheless, I think that having it also in the AI Act, it's a bit of a challenge of supervisors to stay in line, but I think it's good that a wider community that develops new technology is aware of the fact that if you do use this in some of these important decisions in the lives of people, you really need to make sure that the data you put in are the good data, that the algorithms that you programmed are addressing the right questions and the risks, that the outcomes are explainable and fair, and that you're not discriminating, and you have that documented in such a way that you can show that.
So, as we develop our regulatory structures, right, what part of what I'm hearing you're saying is that they are adopting and incorporating what are essentially existing, if you will, mores in terms of how society, how politicians, how stakeholders, how individuals perceive fairness, their expectations, and we are beginning to incorporate them in varying degrees of prescription into our regulatory overlay, which also exists outside of the regulatory environment. I'll speak mostly the US here, but I will maintain that companies are far more afraid of activist shareholders and class action plaintiffs' lawyers than they are of me as their regulator. So, and I think, see, you all agree. So as you look at what's driving not just innovation, but also what impedes innovation. So I'm interested in your perspective, particularly Padma, as you look at, is it regulatory? Is it litigation? What is it that is, because the insurance industry has been more restrained than many other sectors?
Yeah, so I think I would agree with that, right? I think earlier on you asked the question, or you alluded to the fact that we're extremely polite and basically didn't say that regulatory regimes the impediment to sort of AI regulations. And I think that the honest answer is the regulatory regime is trailing slightly behind the technology at this point in time, right? I'm sure I've just offended a lot of people there, but it's true, right? And there are reasons for that, right? Part of me, actually, a large part of me agrees with Frank in terms of, what does it mean to provide transparency, especially in terms of fairness and sort of bias, right? Human beings are all biased. We all have our own biases, right? So the expectation of a machine to not be biased when a machine is sort of the ecosystem built by human beings, right? So where do you draw the line in terms of that sort of expectation, right? So obviously there are things that I think the technology community can do, right? You could ensure that you monitor the outputs for anomalies, right? So that you can start sort of tracking some of these trends, that you can then start to look at whether biases do exist in these systems, right? Though that should be part and parcel of the utilization of artificial intelligence, especially when it touches sort of end consumers, right? So I think that's a fair expectation. However, regulation done to sort of the extreme where you have to prove fairness and bias across a deep neural network, that's not an easy task to do, right? I can't prove fairness and biases the way I think, right? And for some of these sort of unsupervised learning systems, that's not an easy task to do as well. So I think that could be construed as an impediment to sort of innovation. And then the second part of it is, AI system requires copious amount of data. Data Protection Act are quite restrictive in terms of data that can be collected, can be stored, and can be used for AI systems, right? All of the above is not to say that the regulations are unwarranted. They're completely warranted because they're there to sort of protect humans, right? But I agree, Kathleen, there has to be a balance between not stifling innovation to the risks associated with each and every one of these use cases, and what constitute sort of fairness in terms of evidencing that the AI systems sort of adhering to some of these regulations to sort of protect the end consumers, right? So I don't know if there's a clear answer right now, just because this space is moving so rapidly, right? If you look at GPT 3, it has, 178 billion parameters, whatever, in it. GPT-4 has about 1.8. It's not disclosed, 1.8 trillion. Now, to go through each and every one of the algorithm within all of this to ascribe sort of which bit of the weighting is resulting in bias, I'm not sure the technology even exists to do that, or if we can't even do that. Right? So I think regulators partnering with industries, not just the insurance industries, but the tech industries as well, would be crucial in sort of determining how do we begin to measure some of these items that we do need to measure to protect the end consumers.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I think that's part of the reason why we begin to see how, across regimes you have at least the consistency is a focus on governance, it's a focus on risk management, as opposed to necessarily deep dive prescriptive specifics in terms of standards. So, Frank, did you want to speak to this? Because I want to move you into cybersecurity in a second.
Yeah, so I think regulators can be ahead of the game. I really believe that. So first, again, academic, we like referencing. So computer science, statistics, and the mathematics, they already have a certain metrics to debias it. So for example, like you can find like a demographic parity, equalized odds, all kinds of like big words. Yes, there is already like a technology is intact there. And, but we have to like modify this into the insurance world. So I really like the one sentence that in the SOP, and a rate is reasonable and not excessive, and inadequate and unfairly discriminated. So these three things already give a guideline for us. So if you consider no matter what kind of technology, it's an optimization process. So what do you want to optimize? And what do you want to optimize? It should be directed by the regulators. That's my thought.
Oh, thank you. You know, one of the things that I think, Padma, you just said that was very interesting, kind of leads into the next topic, is you talked about data, and you talked about sort of data protection and what we collect, and it sort of starts there, right? So there's a reason why the H Committee is the Innovation, Cybersecurity, Technology Committee. It includes the NAIC's policy work on data protection and privacy, right? Because in this world, this data-driven world, they all converge at some point. So Frank, I particularly wanted to talk to you about how AI might lower the barrier for novice cyber criminals, hackers for hire, hacktivists to carry out effective access and information gathering operations. And how does this contribute to sort of the global ransomware threat that we've been experiencing and continue to experience? You know, is AI an even bigger threat to cybersecurity?
Yes, I guess safe answer is all the technology is double-edged sword, right? And it's politically correct, but useless statement. So I want to go with the certain examples. So the hackers, one of the things they really want to do is, especially ransomware you just mentioned, and it's a social engineering. So especially with the nowadays, you post like pictures on the Facebook or leave some certain comments on the certain website, everything is recorded. And AI able to help us, help the hackers, not us, okay, to grab all these like nitty-gritty details and do the like social engineering. So their phishing email, phishing calls will be more like a true reality. And second, when we talk about ChatGPT, right? So imagine I'm a regulator and I start to drafting certain regulatory statement, and I need like a ChatGPT to refine the certain wording for me. And then I start to putting these informations, and then OpenAI grab this information to train it. And when the hackers and try to do certain prompting, and they immediately find that after having this prompt, you can have the draft you made it, right? That's all possible. And all this kind of risk when it comes to the using these large language models, you have to be considered. And the day before yesterday, they just released ChatGPT 4.0 or 4.0, I'm not sure how to call it. And I look at their documents. I try to figure out how they train the models. And me and my PhD students spent a few hours yesterday trying to find how these models are trained, but this is not there. And it's a completely black box, even for the academic. So we should really consider change the OpenAI to close AI, whatever. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Well, let's continue a little bit with the sort of the cybersecurity and IT security elements of things. So, Petra, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA, is an EU regulation that entered into force last year, will apply as of January of 2025, aiming to strengthen the IT security of financial entities and really harmonize operational resilience rules. Can you talk a little bit more about that, IOPA's role specifically, and how that relates to the AI discussion?
Yeah, so this is a project that is actually taking a lot of time and focus with weekly, if not daily, calls in EIOPA. But it's also a very good initiative. So as a supervisor, when you want to make sure that there's an operational resilience for cyber risk in the entity you supervise, and that entity makes, of course, I would say, use of other providers. And what you do is you start with the licensed entity and you follow the chain of outsourcing, and ultimately the responsibility for resilience is with the license. And sometimes through 11 steps you end up in a certain area. If you do that collectively through your entire market, you will probably find that the ultimate step is actually ending up in an entity where most of your licensed companies end up, because it's the big tech that provides the clouds, or that provides the tooling for data management. So, but you address it through that license. Now, what does Dora do? And she's not the explorer, but it's a digital operation. I always have the song in my head when I say the word, but that has to do with my kids watching it a lot. But it does three things, and I think it's three helpful things. First of all, it says that the supervision of that operational risk, we're not only going through the entity. I mean, the entity still will have to comply, but for them it should not change significantly because, again, they already have to. But we will now also go to the endpoints, to the critical third parties, which we will, starting 1st of January, start to identify, and then, based on resources and a risk-based assessment, say which one will come under formal oversight by the European ASAs, which includes EIOPA, and then the Banking and the Markets Authority, and we need to agree who's doing what. So we will have a joint team led by the DORA director, who is sitting either in Frankfurt and in Paris, but we'll also have people from the member states involved in the team. So that's a bit of the ECB banking supervisory model, and they will actually oversee the operational risk of the critical third-party providers that have been identified. And I think many of you can at least guess which ones will be among them. So that is one, and that's new, and we haven't done that before in this way, and we haven't also done that in this way between the ASAs. So this is a huge also operational challenge to get ready by 1st of Jan. The second thing it does is that it harmonizes red teaming, but also operational resilience testing. So there are several forms out there in EU. The most well known is the Tiber test, but the UK has CBEST. But if you are a cross-border operating company, or if you are a group, you sometimes end up with doing multiple tests to keep multiple supervisors happy. And the idea is that now there will be one way to do the test, which will be through the DORA law. But then once you have done that, that it will be recognized in the entire EU. The final point is the reporting, which is also a burden for the entities if there is a cyber event, but there is also a need to know what is happening when it comes to cyber events. And here DORA will be what we call a lex specialis, and that means it will overrule any other reporting. And so here we work closely with the Cyber Authority, ENISA in Europe, to get to a reporting template, also identifying when and what you need to report, to have a streamlined reporting that will then come in the place of multiple reporting, and there really should be an efficiency in that. And I think with that we create a structure where at least we are better equipped to, first of all, prevent these risks from happening by really focusing on operational resilience and improving that before, but also, and testing it, but also able to see when things are happening and having a structure in place then to jointly deal with that. So that is the idea.
That was an amazing summary of an incredibly complex structure in a very succinct way, so thank you very much for that. It keeps coming back to, the idea, it's data, the movement of data, the security of data, the collection of data, the use of data, and then different types of testing regimes across all of those things. So, Pat, and I want to circle back, start with you about sort of what does testing mean for you? So when we talk about, bias testing, performance testing, validation, We discuss things like, input training data versus other data. Talk to us about what that means for development and deployment of AI systems in a world in which probably the things that you are trying the hardest to avoid, which would be, unfair, adverse impact on protected persons, is difficult sometimes because there's no direct data in order to actually test that against. So let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think testing is crucially important, right? I'm of a strong mind that when firms build sort of AI systems, especially insurers, the first few use cases should be directed towards internal use first. And the reason for that is you have to adapt your testing and your monitoring to ensure that the guardrails that you've set for the ecosystem can be met. And then, from an engineering and development perspective, you can continue to iterate through your monitoring and testing capabilities prior to utilizing an AI system that may sort of advise a consumer or have a direct impact to a consumer or perform underwriting, right, for a consumer, right? There are many toolings, obviously, that exist out there to be utilized as part of the sort of AI system. But it is up to the organization to determine the metrics that you want to measure against, right? How do I sort of measure, how do I ensure my ecosystem is not biased towards race? Now, one way to ensure that is every single input data that I put into the system, I need to mask race, right, from input data. Now, does that automatically assure me that the entirety of my system is not going to be biased towards race? Well, maybe not, because it also depends on the model that I use for the training. Some of these models are pre-trained. I may get them from a software provider, right? So that's why I think that continuous monitoring and iterating through to improve that ecosystem is critical from a testing perspective prior to any sort of deployment. In addition to that, sort of storing that logs and traceability of the input and the output so that your level 2 and level 3 functions within your organization can then be the second and third pair of eyes to continuously validate this ecosystem to make sure that the monitoring and the testing is robust, I think is a must for AI systems.
And it's interesting because I absolutely hear what you say about each organization connected to each use case, connected to its deployment, the potential for harm, et cetera, are going to govern metrics. And yet metrics are scary.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of what, sort of is a holdback in the insurance industry, because whatever you pick, someone's going to sue you about.
Right.
And that is seriously a piece of the concern in moving forward. And I kind of think that begins to address sort of where the regulators come in, right? Because it's, please don't regulate me unless I can stand behind you and use your regulation to avoid the criticism for what my choices have been. So as we now have questions up here, there was a question about the evolution of AI, the evolution of capabilities, and how does regulation kind of keep track with that evolution. So I'm going to ask each of the three of you to just kind of briefly address, what that journey begins to look like. Frank, let me start with you, and then we'll come this way toward Petra, like how regulation flows from and how it keeps up with the evolution of technology and capability.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm academic. I wish that academic side and regulator side always talked more frequently, and I think that's the way we can catch up is the trend. And yeah, also academic people also need to realize what's really going on in the realities, and not just doing the research in order to publish paper. That's not really big impactful in some sense. Yeah, and the way I'm imagining the AI insurance world, or maybe ChatGPT hallucinating right now. So from the consumer perspective, I reach to the insurance company. I only review very limited PII or BII. Then insurance company know what I need. I talk with the AI chatbot, and I try to share my thought, my need, and then there will be a underwriter coming to here and give me a policy. And throughout the day, insurance company may send me some text message or a app, give me an app, and try to warn me certain risky behaviors. And end of the circle, or maybe in the middle of the circle, I found that I made a claim, and if this claim is legitimate, and they will pay me immediately, right? And in the end, they will give me a renewal policies. So it's very simple as should be as in the future. And from the insurer's perspective, when the customer arrive, I already use the government data or insurtech data vendors. I already pre-fill a lot of information about the policyholders. And then I use the recommendation systems to find out what this customer really wants, and I can start to cross-selling certain products. And then this information stored into the a policyholder database and talk to the loss cost model or reserving models directly. And I'm through the certain devices or whatever, I can monitor the likelihood of this policyholder will submit a claim. So when I see the start to crossing a certain probability, I start to advise the policyholders being act very be cautious, right? And or maybe do some claim trials very beginning. And then when policyholders submit the claims, then I have a fraud models that able to tell this is the legitimate or fraud. And then end of the cycle, I can have my retention models again. So all these things can be possible and with the current technology. But I don't think there's a regulatory environment is intact there, and also business model, business rationale is intact there. When I mentioned this whole cycle, there's one thing is missing, right? Agent. And I really think in the future, the agent will be the first function that will be replaced by the AI. And
don't say that really loud, though.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Okay, Frank is an academic. It's okay.
It's okay. Oh, just
and because this is what AI chatbot can able to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions, we won't go into it now, is but whether actuaries are going to ultimately be replaced by AI. It's another seismic shift in the room. So, but Padma, your views, the symbiosis.
So I think, regulators in sort of the financial sector, insurance sector, the working alongside just the insurance companies, the financial sector, may not get us through the iteration required to regulate the technology. Because insurance companies, financial sectors, we have a hand in building the ecosystems. We won't be the people building the models. We won't be the people building the black boxes of the world, the pre-trained of the world. And these large models will just get better and better and better with the advancement of compute and data, right? The other thing that I think would go a long, long way, in addition to sort of regulation pertaining to the uses and being able to sort of evidence all of the things that we discussed earlier from a carrier perspective, it would be great to have regulation that stipulates upskilling. There's nothing like your human defenses to help sort of unearth sort of unsavory behavior of technology, right? Like, and the more humans understand and are not just blindly relying on the output of the technology, the better it would be for the general public, the better it would be for regulators as well.
Yeah, which is part of sort of the training and the validation exercise, because what you want to do is utilize all of those tools, the human element, to catch things before you have the broad application and you find the pattern in the output. So what are your thoughts, Petra, that synergy between, you know, what industry is developing and what regulators are proactively or reactively addressing?
Yeah, I think that I first want to respond, by the way, to the agent comment. I think that when you're in the environment of technology, that's often a thought. But we did a survey. We do every year do a consumer survey in Europe. We asked thousands of Europeans, and even to my surprise, 81% of Europeans indicated that if they buy life insurance or pensions, they want to talk to a person, and preferably in person, could be over the phone. Only 19% was fine with digital sales. So I think that you cannot take the entire, I think maybe if you want a car insurance and you can get an online comparison and then buy it very efficiently, maybe, but if you want to make a decision where you really save for later, for your life, or you take care of your children, I think there are different needs then, I think, in how it is sold to you. And so I do not agree with the conclusion that agents would not be necessary, but I think their profession will change. On how we stay up, I mean, we have an academy, a European academy in now, particularly for the Digital Academy for European Supervisors. Big focus there on AI. We really encourage all the supervisors to send their people there. And what you see here is that we recognize that it's not just about hiring those who know it, but we also need to all upskill ourselves. I think in general, talking about it, making sure you read about it is helpful. And then still, I think you're not always ahead of your industry. While at the same time, also industry needs to learn. And I think that I also saw that in the question. And I think that then in the end goes back to it's also not so difficult. I mean, you need to be able to understand what you're doing. I mean, you're getting money from people and you need to take care of that money well and deliver on a promise. And we used to do that indeed with pen and paper, and then the computer came, and then we had models, now we have AI. But there is a certain common sense that with a moral compass will work. So I think what you mostly need to do as an industry, but also as a supervisor, is there a moral compass, and is it working? Is it working even if there is competition? Is it working even if it's difficult to understand? If there is indeed a very deep learning tool that you can't explain anymore, is that then actually a tool you should use? Is that an impediment to innovation, or is that just a realistic view on how you can still deliver on your responsibilities with new technology, and where actually there are also limitations to what you as an insurer can do? So I think a part of this is also common sense. It sounds very simple when you're sitting here on stage. If you're in the midst of competition, if you have invested already a lot and you then need to call whether or not you're going to move ahead, that is more difficult, but that is why you should have a system in place where then all the ethical considerations are taken on board also when the pressure is high. And I think ultimately that is what the regulator tries to do, to ensure that that is in place, that that thinking is there. And then I think once that thinking also lands with those who develop the software better than they do now. I always say that going to an innovation conference is nice because no one really knows what supervisors are. so you're very safe as a supervisor. Right. But they actually need to start to know us, because I think a lot can also be programmed for the good. And it's also something about fraud. You can never prevent fraud. There will always be fraudsters trying, but so you need to catch them. But I think there's a majority also in the industry that wants to do the right thing, but you just need to make sure that even under pressure, they keep doing that. And I think that is ultimately what you strive for.
Well, I agree, and I think that is where regulators go, whether it's Singapore, whether it's the most recent guidance out of the UK, whether it's the NAIC's model. What we are always looking at is having that decisional track be very responsible. That's where governance and risk management. We only have a very, very short amount of time yet left, and I don't want to disappoint Eric, right, or have him pull me off the stage. So let me ask as a last question for each of you in kind of a lightning round of what predictions do you have for the impact of AI in the insurance sector in the next 5 to 10 years? So 20 seconds each. You start. Yeah.
I can start.
Okay.
So last survey showed last year 50% is now using AI in the back office for sure, and 30% additionally said they will use it. I think in the next 5 years we'll get 100% rate of using it, and I think between 30 and 60% will have moved to the front office, and not just efficiency of operation, but also dealing with clients, and we need to be ready for that.
Padma?
Yeah, so I think in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, considering the advancement of the technology, I think we will get to a situation where people can compare and contrast product, right, for sort of more than just the demographic that products are available to today, to be able to do that. And I believe that there are some people who are working towards that, like sort of democratizing access to information is something that I think all carriers should strive to for the betterment of the policyholders.
Excellent. And Frank, close us up.
Yeah, I think AI is no longer something good to have. I think it is must to have, and that's my closing.
Well, thank you very much. I know that I've learned a lot today, and I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us, and I think I may be timely. Thank you.